Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, and we are back in the saddle once again for another season. And I do want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by my friend Preston Poulter. So you go to Preston's website, pocketjackcomics.com, and sign up for his email list. He will send you 3 PDF copies of his book, so you can actually try it, issue one, see if you like it, and then if you do like it, you should go buy the physical copy. Or better yet, if you go to my eBay store, Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. Right now, Preston was nice enough to send me like 50 of these White Lily issue 4, and this one's a little beat up, so I'm not sending this one out to anybody, but they are fresh, clean, and beautiful, and everybody who orders a comic from me will get one of them if you order from my store until I run out. So there you go, everybody. But that's everything that I got, and I also have other free swag from people. But I digress because I have with me comic artist, creator, other things you've done in the art realm, Siya Oum. So welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Hello, everybody. I don't have YouTube open or Facebook, so if there's any chat questions, I can't see it because I'd hate to have our connection disconnect since I have really slow internet.
Well, I don't think we have anything yet, but you got a lot that you've done. You've done a bunch of stuff. I think for Marvel, you've done some stuff. For obviously Aspen, you've done a little bit for DC. You have your own stuff going on. But why don't you tell in like 2 minutes or less who you are? Because there's people who know you and there's people who don't. And as I kind of stated, you've done a little bit of everything, I think, in comics, and you worked for everybody to an extent.
I'm a comic book artist, writer. I usually draw by hand, but there's times when I would, you know, do it digital and color as well. So I was colorist when I first started out with Aspen, and I've been doing covers and just all sorts of stuff. Like you said, all sorts of stuff. I'm currently working on Lady Mechanica. I'm the penciler, inker. Joe and Marcy are writing the story and doing the covers. We just finished the Kickstarter, and I'm slowly working back into my own stuff right now after that book is done in December. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Let's actually talk a little bit about you because obviously you, and I'm going to say this and hopefully I'm not going to speak out of turn, but I feel that a good chunk of your career was in Aspen and it kind of put you on the
Mm-hmm.
map in a lot of ways. And I
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
that you've done some color work, obviously, I think on Phantom, on Soulfire, and then you did, I think, some cover work as well. But I think the thing that really put you on was Lola XOXO, which has, I think, 3 volumes and then it has Wasteland. I think is kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the
So
forefront.
it's 3 volumes plus a mini story that Vince Hernandez wrote. So yeah, my editor slash friend. So yeah,
And my understanding is that obviously it was hand drawn, and I think you've done some of it in Copic marker. I
a
think
lot of it
so.
was actually most of the book was Copic, and then I had to slowly use ink and watercolors because it gets kind of expensive, and when you have tight deadlines, it's just too much work to like refill it and stuff, and plus the way it smelt the markers, it was starting to give me headaches. I didn't know if it was the deadlines or the markers that was causing some of the headaches, so I just like gave up on it after the volume finished, the last
What is
volume.
that like though? Because obviously Lola XOXO, I read the first 2 volumes, and obviously I need to catch up, but I really enjoyed it. I love the cover art. I love your art on it, and then obviously I know that Elias Chazudis has done some work, and I love
Hmm. Hmm.
Elias, and a few other people have done some work on it as well as far as covers. But what is that like? Because the story, it's complicated enough, but it's not overly complicated. But it is beautifully illustrated,
Oh, thank you.
and that's what I think is the real selling point more than anything else, is that it's beautifully illustrated. It's not digitally colored, and that's
Hmm.
the other thing too, is that it's nice to see a actual product that's sort of handcrafted, for lack of a
Yeah,
better.
it's been a while, huh?
It sounds weird saying it, and like I'm even questioning like me saying it, but like it's very cool to see it, and the Copic marker stuff, and then obviously when you went into watercolors, that what is that like? Because that's a very different feel on a comic book than what we
Hmm.
get today. And nothing against today's
Oh
work,
yeah, yeah, I know.
very
Yeah.
different.
I think it's because like if you're gonna do something challenging like drawing comic books and writing it, you might as well make it look the way you want it to, right? Like, if you're gonna spend the time, at least get what you can out of it. And I mean, It also depends on the genre. If it was like a science fiction or like the one I'm working on now, it's going to be, it's, it's cyberpunk. So obviously it's probably going to be colored with Photoshop, but I still prefer like pen and ink. So all of stuff's going to be done, by hand, at the very least, the line art. The colors I'll just, do in Clip Studio or something like that, Procreate. But yeah, it was satisfying. I mean, I was dying to get my own series done. And so if you're going to, like I said, if you're going to do it and it's your own thing, you might as well make it look the way you want it to. So,
And do you feel, because obviously, the selling point for me, and I'm just speaking for me, was the art and how it was done. And I knew that it was done, parts of it were done in Copic marker, and I knew that it wasn't a digital, colored book. And I knew that was what I knew. And I'm like, man, this is really cool looking at this. And I like how, and I can say this the next way, that there are a little bit of imperfections in it. And that's what makes
oh
it
yeah,
also
oh, yeah.
cool.
It's
And
definitely
it
that.
sounds weird. Because it's nice, as far as I'm concerned, to see something not being perfect and seeing something being a piece of art rather
Hmm.
than, oh, the color is perfectly saturated. Because at a certain point, I kind of want a little roughness in a comic sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming you grew up with the comics before they, like the image, before they did digital, and there was a certain level of connection you had with the creation of it because you kind of saw it, and so you're conscious of the person or people that put their effort and time into it. Not to say that people who do digital colors, like, because I do that too, it's not, hard to do, but at the same time, like, you could see the imperfections pretty clearly, and like I told everybody before, I was doing a podcast, like I can remember every page I did with Lola and the mistakes I made and what was going on in my life because it was so blatant. Like there's nothing covering those mistakes. Like, you know what I mean? Like the late nights, I could tell which ones no one could fix for me or it would take too long to fix or just look weird. So, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's, the internet's forever. Well, that comic book is forever. Like all those imperfections are there.
Yeah, and even to talk about that, because this is one of the things that I also think is interesting. And obviously, I'm looking at this, and when I get a little bit more money, I might be buying some pages from your book, because I know exactly where those pages are for sale. I know exactly where they are. I stumbled across it because I was doing research and I was finding images for this interview. And there's a few pages that I really like. But what is that like too? Because it is all original art and all the pages are original and
Hmm.
obviously they're inked, and that's another revenue stream. And I also think it's another component where somebody now can actually own a physical page that
Hmm.
Copic markered out, that you watercolored out, versus if it's all digital or the line art is digital or done in pen and ink and then the colors are digital. I mean, it's a little harder, I think, to give a colored piece as far as
Yeah, it definitely is. And I have a friend, Dustin Nguyen, who does watercolor. So when you buy one of his pages, it's going to be intact. And I think that was kind of me as the artist as well. As like, I do want to have a piece that I look at and I know that I did everything on the page. And when someone does buy it, they get like a completed piece of art, So it was just being the person who loves art in general and then just being able to do it myself. Because, sometimes you can't pick between being a fine artist and a commercial artist. So there's got to be a way to like merge the two. And I felt like that was the best way to do it, because I want my pages to exist in the real world as often as possible. I mean, even though sometimes that's not possible for the budget for a project or something like that.
No, because I just think that obviously I like original art, I like commissions, and I like to buy cool things. And I think it is very cool. And I think it's actually very important. Obviously, I like to make money in comics, and I understand that, but I'm also a fan. And I also want certain things. And I think that as a fan, I don't know how many true diehard believers there are that are going to go buy a Lola XOXO cover because they're a little pricey. They're a little pricey, the original art. But the ones who want it are going to want to spend the money and they want that thing on their wall. And I think that's where this becomes really interesting, is that if I love a book, but it's all done digital, it's hard for me to get a piece of that in a collection.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's like the thing. And I think that's sometimes a disconnect in comics right now, is that cool. I want an original piece of art, but your whole book's digital, so it can't exist.
Yeah, and I think people, especially right now with AI art, at some point you're going to see people are going to gravitate towards what they gravitate towards, and the longevity of something, of the art form. And we're always going to tell stories, and we're always going to have sequential art. I mean, that's like a no brainer, but maybe 100 years down the road, not that 100 years is going to matter. Um, it's just a form of storytelling, like cave drawings. I go back to that. There's only so many caves that you've seen drawings on, and those things will last forever. And it just feels like there's a stamp on something, when you do it by hand, and more effort, I guess. And also, it's like documenting something. So when you see by hand, it's documented in a way that even if it's digital and it's on a hard drive somewhere, it just doesn't feel. I guess that's the thing. I guess with NFTs, right? Like every value that we give it is just that me personally, growing up with comic books and paper and stuff, that's just the way that's what I gravitate towards emotionally, and that's what I tend to stick with. And I completely understand, like I said, digital, the forms, and there's a pro and con to everything, but just personally for me, I just like to be able to touch and feel things because it's so sensory, and it doesn't feel like I'm missing something. It's kind of like watching a movie. You could kind of pretend like you could smell something or taste it, but you can't. You can't do that. You could just think you can, but you can't. So it's always better to experience things as much as possible with all your senses.
See, this is actually interesting because, and I'm curious your take. So I read both comics digitally, and I buy a lot of physical stuff, and I really enjoy physical. And my business is rooted in a bunch of things. And what I've decided is that I want to sell a physical product, because when you have a limited physical product, people want that. And the people want it is that I'm selling to somebody who either wants to reflip it or is a massive collector. And, sometimes they're using me almost to service it because they couldn't buy it at the time, or it's sold out within 5 minutes. It's one or the other. And I think it's a real interesting thing because when I have a Comixology subscription. So I will read books that I feel no pressure if I don't like them. And so I read The Black Dahlia, which is that horrific crime in LA. Fascinating crime. It is not, if you want something happy tonight, don't look into it, is all I'm going to say. But I didn't know if I was going to like the graphic novel, but because I was reading it digitally, I felt no pressure to like it, where if I didn't like the first chapter, I'm like, fuck this book. And I would have moved on to something else. But I also understand that there's a bunch of product that I do like and that I want that in physical. And so what is that like for you? Because I would imagine that it's a little bit complicated because you also, as an artist and doing interiors, you want people to read your book, but you also want people to collect it. So if somebody who's reading your pencils, we'll use Batman Beyond. So I'm a huge Batman Beyond fan. And you did number 12, guys, number 12 of Rebirth, Batman Beyond. Just go buy the book, guys. All jokes aside, I'm presuming you want people to read your book as well, but also get a physical copy. Like, how does that work in your head?
I mean, it'd be kind of because I know right now they say that more people in comics are still gravitating towards floppies, right? Or just physical copies. There's not enough people being onboarded with digital. I don't know if it's really true or if it's just the way that it's being I guess sold or access to it, maybe, because I know with manga, right? Like there's no problem digitally or the physical copy. Like people are getting a hold of those things no matter what. And I feel like there's a disconnect between what we assume is happening versus what's actually happening with the medium. So I'm not for or against anything. I mean, ideally, I'd like to physically create it and then have it digitally and physically for the people that want it, and for myself personally to collect and to have physical copies. So if you could do both, I mean, that's double the amount of income that you could get from just one property, one IP, and then I could turn around and sell the original pages if you want to look at it that way from an artistic standpoint. So there's multiple ways to do it, but I just think that we kind of have to stick with it, and we kind of have to, I think, perfect the comic book digital reading experience. Maybe.
Do you feel that there's also oppositional to digital? Because I speak to people in the comic book realm, and in my opinion, I think a lot of people, they're happy to include a digital in their Kickstarter, but I feel like comic shops and other people and even readers and even maybe even the big corporations, to some degree the big two, are very much anti-digital. And I mean, I live in a
Hmm.
digital world. I work in digital accessibility. So my whole world is digital, it's platforms, it's learning education, digital platforms. And I realize that this is the future because education is becoming completely digitalized and it's getting better. And you could put videos. I mean, if you could have action stuff, and I think Marvel tried to do it in your comic book, it changes the medium on a digital level. But I feel like there's opposition to it, and both from a consumership as well as even from artists saying there's a whole bunch of money to be made in this digital space.
Okay. So let me ask you some questions, and maybe this will help me out too. 'Cause I'm all for trying to figure this out, right? Like I'm not. I'm very. I mean, I want to take a nuanced approach to it. So, is there a reason why the bigger corporations or companies, and then there's some consumers, which, I mean, they're used to it being a certain way, and then there's shops. Obviously, I know why they would be against it, but is there a reason why, outside of the obvious things that we hear, that there's an opposition to it, or is it just so much friction just to
I
change
I
the
think
platform?
I think what it is that I think it's profit margin, to be honest. I think on a digital there is less profit to be made because it is harder to justify a $10 indie book on a digital platform. I think it's harder to justify a $6 Marvel book to sometimes on a digital position versus a $3 position. And I think that's part of it is that the profit margin decreases. And I think that, because there's less distribution. I mean, this book is a $5 book because it's tagline. I don't know what Preston sells it digitally, but he's not selling me this thing digitally for $5. And if he's doing offset printing, this book costs what, like 81 cents to print? And so now let's say he sells it to me 250 digitally, he's going to make less money on the digital. And so that's where I think a lot of creators get really, really and that's what I think it is. I mean, that's just my thoughts because technically speaking, if you offset print, White Lily #4, and you're selling for $5 and it's going to cost you 81 cents, and you can't justify selling me digitally for $5 and you have to sell it to me for 250, do the math. Sure, you didn't have to print a book, but 81 cents minus 5 is more than 250. And so I think that's where that comes from. That's just my thoughts, and I think that's I don't think that's an obvious reason. I think that it's money. I think it's profit, and I think that's what it is. And I think that also it's harder sometimes to say this is a digital product and that you can't physically hold it because comics for the longest time have been a physically held thing, and I think that's a little bit more obvious. But I think that for whatever reason, with movies and music, it's been adapted, but with comics, I don't think that culture has come the same way.
Oh, okay. So, here's the weird thing, right? Like we're all complaining, every one of us, because the books used to cost $2.99. Okay, so the consumer is obviously not happy with the fact that printed books are about $5, $6 now, I'm assuming. And then if you're doing Kickstarter, it's close to $10 a copy. And so we
If you're lucky,
consumers are complaining about that price, me included, right? But then we're also complaining that okay, let's just say that digital books are $2 instead of $6. So there's a disconnect there again with like the price of the printed book. So ideally, we'd like inflation not to happen, but it's just the reality of it. And I even think that inflation hasn't even caught up yet with the prices of everything, even though like there is a supply chain disruption. And I think we all knew that as soon as it happened, like, okay, there's some stuff that's going to cost a lot more money. It might take a couple years, might take 4 years, but before you know it, it's going to be $10 a book. And I realize that, and that's kind of something we have to contend with, especially because I have friends they own comic shops and they work at shops. And then people who collect, and then I have an art rep, and I myself draw books. So I think right now with the solution, we just have to call it what it is, or the problem, so that we could go ahead and figure out ways of fixing it. I mean, I think everybody's got their own method and
I
strategy right now. If you think about after COVID, and then you have different distribution chains now.
I also think, and I'm gonna say this, and I might get some flack for it. I think people in comics are not very good at business sometimes. I think some are, but I think a lot of people and a lot of creators are not good at business. And I don't think, and then I mean, look, is I wasn't good at business either when I first started. I've been doing and buying and selling comics for 10 years. It took me a good 5 years before I knew what I was doing to the degree. And I went through a pretty big expansion this year, but I wasn't ready in year 5 to do that. And so I think that's also part of it, where I think sometimes people in comics just aren't good at business. And I don't think that they want to put the time, because I don't think business is, I mean, some people are just naturally good at things, and it's just instinct. But I think most people, you have to work at your craft. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that because right now, I mean, I'll be honest, I see most books on Kickstarter are $12. And I mean, and that's assuming you're lucky. I mean, I went through a Kickstarter. The cover A was $25, and I'm like, you are too rich for my blood. And then their variant is 35, and I'm like, what the fuck? Because I'm a Zenith guy, right? They'll sell me a Paul Green for $25, and it's limited to 250. And I understand it's a bigger company and they have more infrastructure, but I'm like, it's $35 for an artist I never heard of, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I want to back your project, but you're a little too rich, and then your digital's like $12 too, and I'm like, this is a little too rich for my blood, and I have a comic budget, and I spend a lot of money, and I want to do business with these people, and I'm like, I can't even test your book out.
Okay, so that gives me an idea, and I really think that my solution, not saying that I know everything, but I do care about business, because you kind of have to survive in this climate, right? Uh, is offer the bare bones of what you could offer, so that people could taste your book, and it's not like, whoa, it's $10. The starting price point should be market value, right? And then you should have it digital, and I think also traditionally. And then you should have floppies and trades. Like, I think you have to kind of not put all the eggs in the one basket, because eventually it's going to play itself out. And if enough people do it, then you're going to have a healthier market. Whereas right now, you're the clientele or fan base has to go to multiple different ways of getting a book.
I can tell you my price points. So my cover A's are 12 to 15, have to be as a consumer. I feel very comfortable at $12 to $15, 15 on the high end, 12 on the low end.
Okay.
I don't balk at $12 for a cover A. If you have a cover B that's a variant, $20. Let's say that, we'll put J. Scott Campbell out there. Okay, I'll pay $30 for a J. Scott Campbell on a Kickstarter. I'll pay $40 for it technically, but that's because that is an added value premium. But if I've never heard of your artist and you're asking me $25 for him or her, I'm kind of like, what the hell? Like, I would pay on a Kickstarter $25 for a cover from you, but it's because you have a track record. And I would think it's on the high end a little bit. I feel more better at 20, but I understand that Siya Oum has done a lot of things for Marvel, for Aspen, for a bunch of other companies. So I understand that there's value in you as an artist, but I wouldn't pay $50 on a Kickstarter for your cover unless it was a hollow foil, but a basic cover. I think that's where this has gotten out of hand, is that you have and what I think it is that I think people are just trying to recoup their money, because artists are expensive. They're very expensive. When you get a premium top artist out there, it could be $8, $9, $1,000. And so you have to charge 30, 40, $50 sometimes for their covers, because you're only going to sell 20 of those, and you need to get your money back or get 80% of your money back on it. And I think that's part of the problem too, is that people are spending too much money, which means that prices have to go up when they should be figuring out ways how to build their book cheaper.
Yeah. Something to think about. I'm glad that I'm assuming you brought this up with the other guessed maybe previously, because obviously it's not sustainable if all we have is what you're saying is like the hobby has now become more expensive than
Oh,
making.
this is years of conversations. This is not like yesterday. Me and him were talking about, me and my friend Paul were talking about this. No, this is years, and this is like a conversation with people like Ben Dunn. This is a conversation with people like Rob Matari. This is a conversation with people like Tom Hutchinson. This is a conversation with people like Pat Chan. I've had this conversation with Ralph Tedesco and Joe Bruscia. Like, I've had this conversation on this show in multiple ways, and I am confused because I want to do business and I want to retail with these people and all these people on Kickstarter. And that's so it's not a conversation that is rooted in altruism by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that when somebody has an expensive book and then their retail package has to be $500, it's like, I can't play. And I'm trying to make money. You're trying to make money. And I think the whole thing's gotten jacked up. And I'm always curious what somebody else thinks, because I'm looking at it as a person who wants to sell your book on eBay or whatnot. And then, but I also want somebody to fund on Kickstarter, not just fund, but I want them to make an extra 1,500 and hit the number they really need, not the number they put out there, but the number they need.
Yeah. I for me personally, like, I'm aware of the brand, right? Like my own personally, and an idea of if you don't do certain types of things, then you're not going to get the value that people want out of your books and their product. And I also am aware that people have bought my stuff in the past, and it's like, that last thing I want to do is someone spent $50 on my book and I turn around and like on my shop sell it for $3 or something like that. Like, whoa, you totally destroyed your own brand just like that. But at the same time, like, you have to keep putting out product and doing stuff, or else the value that someone put on you, you kind of disappear. It has been per se. And I want to keep working in the industry, but at the same time, I don't want to make it unhealthy by jacking up prices for stuff or creating products that it might cause unintended consequences, because I want to draw interior stuff still. That's why I do it, because I enjoy it. And I feel like there's still so much for me to do as an interior storyteller and artist, So you got to keep that healthy. So there's like this balance, but I can't obviously do it by myself, and a handful of us can't do it on our own. So you kind of have to start somewhere, and hopefully it picks up steam. If you do it right, people are going to follow if they see that there's something to it. But yeah, it's kind of tough doing it that way, because you still got to put out some work on top of like hopefully making money, but not like destroying the industry at the same time, like the bubble, I guess.
I'm going to throw something out there, and you don't have to answer, but I'm going to ask you a question. Actually, I'm going to rephrase my question in my head. How many people do you know in the industry who are dead broke and should not be in comics, should be having a day job, and they have young kids, and you wonder, saying, how are they going to send their kids to college? I think this way, right? I'll speak for myself. I know at least 10 people in that circumstance.
I think percentages will probably work better than actual people. Yeah.
I know 10 people off the top of my head that I can name, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to.
Oh, of course.
But I don't know on a percentage level, but just for me, I find that crazy, and I find that it is a very complicated industry,
Mm-hmm.
and look, I can be that statistic too. It just so happens that this is the reason why I'm not doing a book, because I don't know if I would be profitable. And I think it is a very complicated industry right now, where I know a lot of people who are not profitable or are barely profitable. Might be even a better way how to look at this. And they have day jobs, but their book requires about a pump in of $500 every single year.
Well, so let's put it this way, like, whether it's comic books or any industry where people who are working in it aren't focused on the business side of it, like, because a lot of it is a bunch of small businesses if you look at it that way, right? Whether you're the creator or whatever, you have to have a business license to do business. So if you treat it like a business, I think, even though it's an art form, it's still an art business, then I think it comes across differently, and we'd have a healthier industry. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I do know that once you lose sight of the fact that we all have to pay health insurance, we have to put food on the table, and we all want families and we want to have some time off, then you treat it like a business, and you're marketing like a business, like a small business used to do in yellow pages or commercials on TV, and you got to put out the product, which means there's got to be a set amount of time that you're spending to do certain things. And if you put it, if more people, creators did it that way, it would be healthy, because then you're focused on the reason why something's not working. But when you're so busy trying to take someone down, honestly speaking, it's really hard to focus on the business side of it when your focus is mainly, because you're making it seem like it's such a finite thing. Whereas if you look at like the manga market or anything like that, obviously it's healthier. It's still, you still got to put out work, but the price to pay for a manga and and the people reading it in the market is healthier, in the sense that it doesn't cost an arm and a leg to create it and print it, and then distribute it. So, and there's younger kids who are reading it digitally, and I'm aware of that because I'm one of those people. So
Me too.
I'm just thinking, it's just, if you just focus on the business side of it, and don't be shy about it, because there's nothing wrong with being more organized as an artist. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it'd be a little healthier at the very least.
The best piece of advice came not directly, but on YouTube from Mark Cuban. And he gave one of probably the best pieces of business advice that everybody in business, no matter what it is he said, you should probably go to your local community college and take an accounting class. You laugh. You laugh, and so do other people when I tell them this. But I say, great, you're not taking it to get a grade. You're taking it to learn how to do your books. But more importantly, what it's going to do is that it's ultimately going to start focusing and changing the way your brain works. It's going to put you in a little bit more of a business mindset. So let's say that you're a creative, free spirit, and that's your personality. Let's say that interjects 3% of business into your life. You're still going to be 97% creative, free spirit. But guess what?
No, that's true.
You're going to be a little bit less free spirited, and you may make a decision or two that might get you an extra few $100s, and might be the difference between you being completely in the red or being halfway in the red. And it's a great piece of advice, because what he's ultimately saying is that you go to your community college, spend $200 to survey a course. Don't even show up for half the tests because you don't care if you really don't want to. And guess what? You're going to figure out and learn. And you can announce, you can tell the professor, hey, look, I'm running a small business and I'm really here just to get that skill set. And I guarantee you that professor or that teacher, whoever it is like, cool, how can I help you? And I guarantee you that's going to be the conversation. So that's the best piece of advice that I've ever picked up.
It's funny because you could actually see a correlation with people who are very business minded in the industry versus the ones that aren't, because the ones that are, generally speaking, and I see longevity in their careers, is they're very business minded, focused, and they understand that this is how we make our money. So they are more successful. If you notice, it's almost 10 for 10, right? If you're focused. Sometimes some people, you have just enough of something that will get you going for a while. But I think that at the end of the day, it's like people who are focused on it like a business are more than willing to do it and have fun doing it, because you're not so worried about paying that bill. And I get it. I've been in a place before where I just wanted to be that like rock star artist. And I realized, okay, you got to think about your 401k, and it's not happening with the way that you think about stuff, so.
See, it's funny because I fell into what I've done. And the whole story, for those who don't know, is that I was a comic collector, didn't think about my business, and I didn't have money for comics the next month and beer in college. So I bought a book a little while ago when I was in my freshman year in college, maybe 2 years before that, for $20. It was trading on eBay for $120, sold it for $110. And I had a bunch of money for beer and comics for the next semester, and it was great. It was absolutely great. And then I did that a few more times, and then I figured out how to run my business. But I was always an investor, and then I got into stock investing. And then what wound up happening is that I kind of found correlations, and I'm obviously a hobbyist to this stuff, and that's how my business started, where I buy a lot of toys for myself. I have exposure to a bunch of toys for myself, and then on top of that, I'm now making money that goes right back into buying equities, which are stocks. And so now my business has parameters on it. So my eBay business funds a greater investment opportunity which then becomes self-sustaining, and that money never comes out. And then my business is self-sustaining. And it's crazy. So I don't pump any money into my business, and it takes care of itself.
Oh, so you got the passive income thing going perfectly fine because you
I
focused on it.
it's I figured out what to do, and then every once in a while an opportunity comes around where you gotta drop $3,000 in. But when you drop $3,000 in, you're gonna make 12, and then you pull out your $3,000 the second you make your 12.
Mm-hmm.
But that happens maybe once every 5 years. An opportunity like that comes across. But those are not the norm. But my whole thing is that the business sustains itself, because if I buy a book for 20, I sell for 60. I then take that $20 and I buy a new book for 20. And then that 60 bucks after all the fees, taxes, and that stuff gets down to $16.45 in pure profit. But meanwhile, I bought another book and we repeat the cycle. So it's amazing. And new money has to come in if you want to expand that model, because you just need more capital, or you can grow very slowly, or you roll over your money that instead of taking out a distribution, you just roll it over. And that's how I did expansion this year. That's exactly how I did it in the last 9 months, is I just rolled over the money instead of taking a distribution. But I did that. I mean, not to like brag, but like, I don't think a lot of people understand that in comics. I don't. And I think it's a not a complicated principle. I don't
don't
think
know if it's they don't understand it or what am I trying to say here?
maybe I'm being a little too mean, in which that I don't. Maybe they don't not understand. Maybe they can't do it because maybe they don't have enough of a profit margin to cover it. Because I know plenty of books that are, just make what they need to make, and they have $50 left over. It is very hard to roll over $50 into something. First thing, if your cost was $6,000 and you did 18,000, it's very easy to roll over costs into issue 2 quickly, and then doing a side story or another project, because you have the money to do that. And so maybe I'm being a little too mean, or
I don't know if you're being mean, or I'm just I think what I'm trying to figure out is like, I think we could all understand a lot of things, but it's more about the amount of focus and dedication you have towards a certain thing. Let's just say, for example, like with the projects that I'm doing right now and the amount of time it takes to do the projects and to make sure, because, I have a mortgage, you have to get things done, right? So I think there's very little room in my brain or head for anything that's not related to what I'm doing work-wise. So, I mean, honestly speaking, I don't have a whole lot of time online to type a bunch of stuff out. It just doesn't, it's not in the purview because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me. It's like, well, I'm already exhausted doing all this work and focused on making it look at least half decent. It's really hard to focus on stuff. So I just don't know how people have the mental capacity to do anything more than what's necessary to survive and sustain an adult.
I could tell you
life.
It's called like 20 hours of sleep a week. I have a 40-hour work week. I'm managing my investments, and if I get 30 hours of sleep in a week, I'm very happy. And I'm pretty sure by the time I'm 50, my doctor's gonna be like, "Dude, what the fuck's wrong with you? Why are you drinking like 6 monsters a day?" Like, I drink like 2 or 3 of them a day now, because there's no way I'm awake. But obviously, I get the point.
That's it's just focus, because there's so many other things I'd rather do besides just drawing, because I like going outdoors and stuff. I have hobbies where if I had the time to focus on stuff, it would be things that made me happy, but otherwise, I mean, I do like the business of comic books, even though it's like kind of up in the air. I think it's there's a lot of room to grow in it, like you're saying, it's not working out perfectly right now, but there's so much room to make something cool out of it. So I think that should be the focal point, right?
Fair enough. Maybe I'm privileged. I don't know. Maybe I'm privileged because I really enjoy money. I really enjoy making money. I enjoy talking about money. I enjoy investing. I enjoy running my business. And I enjoy hunting down and finding good comic book and alternative investments. And maybe that's the problem, is that it's a hobby, that's a business. And so for me, it's like I enjoy spending hours finding the trade. Like, and I really enjoy reading, like K16 reports in the stock market. And I'm one of those guys. So like, I really enjoy it. I find it enjoyable.
Well, that's
So
maybe the key is enjoying what you do. I mean, it's starting to sound really artsy fartsy, but you do have to enjoy what you do, right? Like if you're not, you're going to be pretty upset and angry and burnt out every day, and I've been there. It's not like every day is like, oh yeah, this is funny. At some point I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here complaining too much. Something's going on. I need to figure this out and then do things that'll make it less like, what are you doing it for if you're not happy to do it, right? I mean, it's comic books. It's not like what's a harder job or that's not
so
as
I'm going to challenge.
rewarding, I guess.
I think every person who directs a movie, comics, writes a novel, your job is to entertain me. And that is a beyond important component. And I think that's a really important job because I'll be honest, my life is stressful. And so I purposely take days off. That like on a Thursday or a Friday, I'm gonna have a beer, 2 or 3, and I'm gonna watch some anime, I'm gonna watch some wrestling, I might read some manga, I might read some comics. And your job, everybody who's in comics, because I'm not a comic writer, is to entertain me and basically take the edge off with maybe some assistance from some other things, to definitely take the edge off my week. So I think that it's incredibly important because I'll be honest, if I read 10 comic books on my Friday night and they all suck, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be a good weekend. And this is not going to relax me.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
after reading 2 of them, I'm probably going to not look at the other 8.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm going to go watch something that I know, like I've done that where it's like, and the other 8 could have been the best things I've ever read. And then guess what? Maybe I don't touch it for a few weeks. And so I think you have an extremely important job. I mean, but better yet, even your covers. Because I've looked at comic covers and I'm like, oh man, my life's not that bad. Like I've had a bad day and I've seen a cover. And I'm like, you know what? That's a great cover and my life isn't bad. Or it puts me in a better mood. So I actually think that what artists and writers and everybody in comics, I think it's incredibly important when it's done correctly.
But like you said, because of how important our job is, you have to do it as best as you can, and you have to appreciate it. Because, like I said, because this is what I picked to do. Honestly, it's not like someone forced me to draw comic books. So I have a hard time like being upset at my job, being as how this is kind of my choice. Our job is to entertain, and that's kind of how I see it. And take people somewhere, and it's not just blowing smoke, but it's definitely true, because at the end of the day, if I blame someone else for my job and me picking comic books, and I guess I could have became obviously a million other things, right? So here I am, I'm still doing it. Something's working, or else I would be working at a grocery store or working at a restaurant or running one, because my dad had a restaurant and I love food. So I was like, I could do that, but I'm not doing that. So yeah.
No, I feel you. I feel you. Since we're talking about comic covers, I do want to show some of my favorite that you've done, and these are some really good ones that I really 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 like. So I like this one a lot.
Oh, that was oils. Yeah, that was done in oils, I think.
So I like that one, and I
That
actually
was
have
fun.
that
Yeah.
one, but I don't know where it is. So I need to go find it. It's probably next to the other Gwen Stacy's that I have. So that's I like that one. I like this one a
Oh
lot.
yeah, that's Tom
I know
Hutchinson's, right? Yeah.
that's from that's old. That's from when Big Dog was at Aspen.
Oh man, is it that old now? Oh boy.
That was what, like 2013, 2014, I think.
Oh, and the time flies when you have deadlines. You just go with the deadlines. And that's how my years work.
I like that one. This one's great too.
That one was fun. That was all Copics right there. Yeah, I think so. Maybe a little bit of watercolor, because that's a ton of Copics to do on the building. I can't remember. I'd have to see the original piece.
Because that's a great one right there. I really, really, really also enjoy this as well, since it pops up. Because
That one was fun. That one's Copics too. Oh my god. Okay.
So let's even talk about this one, because Star Wars is Star Wars. And what is that? Because I don't think you've done another Star Wars.
I've done three Star Wars.
I
It's
don't
just
know the other two then. I don't know the other two, but nonetheless, it's still Star Wars.
I am super picky whenever I can be about, like, you got the bucket list of IPs that you want to do stuff for. I have my bucket list. So definitely Star Wars was one of them, Transformers, and a few other ones. And that's kind of why I was at Aspen for a long time, because I was a huge Michael Turner fan and I loved Joe Benitez and all the Top Cow guys. So I kind of followed my career based off of things that I really loved, and it didn't hurt that they treat me very well,
Yeah,
like family, and so I've just been lucky. Now that I've gotten that itch scratched, now I'm gonna go back to what I want to do, which is my own stuff.
So let's actually even talk about that, because obviously, I mean, Aspen and what you've done with Aspen is Lola XOXO. I think is your baby, and that's what I think a lot of people know you for. That's what I know you from. And then obviously you've done other things. But what is that even like to have Aspen sort of championing you? Because they kind of took a shot on you. I mean, they kind of did.
Oh yeah, for sure they did. I was like, hey, I'm awesome. Just trust me. No, it's you just have to respect the people that you're working with and what you're trying to do, and hopefully give them the best thing that they can for giving you a shot, because they had every reason not to, but it was just what I really wanted. And at some point they're like, okay, she's not going to shut up. So no, I'm just joking. Vince was just like a huge champion for me. Like, he just knew I was doing the right things, I guess, to get there, because I was doing covers and then some backup stuff. And,
Did you also feel, because sometimes in life, I mean, people say, oh, nobody's lucky, you make your own luck. I don't know if that's completely true. I think that being in the right place at the right time is extraordinarily helpful.
I think it's both, for sure.
Because I've been in rooms and in circumstances, and I met certain people because of other people, and then I asked, and then I said, nothing's going to happen, and then it happened, right? Like, I got to interview the Bushwhackers. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I got to interview the Bushwhackers from WWE, and it was great because I just met the right person who hooked me up. And I'm like, this is never going to happen. Guy threw it out. He's going to try to do me a solid. And then it happened. And it was just so happened that I was in the right place at the right time.
I think it's both. I definitely think it's both. Like, you have to be prepared for that opportunity, because if I think back now, there's times when you would think an opportunity would present itself where I would be ready for it, but I'm like, oh, I have nothing to show for this thing I want to do. Therefore, it doesn't happen. But you kind of have to put yourself in that place, or if it does accidentally happen, that you're ready for it. Otherwise, it becomes nothing, right? Like, it's not luck.
No, I was thrown out into the deep end, just thrown right out into the deep end. Interview number 4, just thrown right out into the deep end. And it was just like, I have a choice. I could either drown or I could swim. And
but you know what? I'll take both. I'll take whatever I can. Luck or fate or hard work. I'll do one so that the other hopefully will happen too. That's all I can do.
and obviously, I do like these as well, which is
your. Oh yeah, so Fathom. So that was obviously I always wanted to work on Fathom because of Michael Turner. So that was a dream job as well.
And these are cool because I think these are 1 in 12s. So
I didn't know they were 1 in 12s, but that was definitely digital. Oh wait, no. I think part of it was done on paper, because there was a time when I was doing Fathom where I was traveling in the car, so I did what I could with whatever, where I was located at the time. So
because I like ratio variants a lot. For those who don't know how it works, if somebody orders 12 of a cover A, they get 1 of that cover, and that's technically counted as the 13th cover in the print run of however many are produced.
It's ridiculous, man.
I have a formula. I have a mathematical formula that actually calculates it, because my friend's like a mathematician, and he actually calculated it. It's a pain in the ass to do it. If you have a 1367 print run, it is a pain in the ass. If you have a 1 in 5, 1 in 10, 1 in 15, and then a 1 in 20, it is a pain in the ass to figure it out. But the formula works. It works. We've tested it. It's an amazing formula. And if anybody wants it, I'm more than happy to send it to them for free. More than happy to in a PowerPoint. It's a brilliant formula. But what is that like? Because it is nice though to have a ratio variant, because they are rarer and it's incentivizing, and it's talking about business. a comic shop might want that cover, but that means they're going to have to order at least 12 of the book. And so it's good for a lot of people. And I think it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on what. But the thing is, like, because there's so many people that went on the variant business model, now the shop has to sit there and really analyze it like a stock before they. But we're not talking penny stocks here. We're talking stocks that are maybe well above what you should invest to make sure it works. Because if it doesn't work, you end up with all these copies, right? And I think that's kind of where the bubble came from, in a way, is because now you're not dealing with just little ones that you just kind of like, oh, I could just tear the cover off and send it back. Like, it doesn't work that way anymore. So now you have all this stock that you are losing money on, and there's no way to get it back. Because what if the company goes under and nobody wants to buy it? Then you're like, oh shit, now what? Now let's go backwards and try to like undo some of the damage and figure it out. Granted, I think that there's a value in every part of the business right now, whether it's digital, Kickstarters, the way it's being distributed in multiple different distribution companies, and then the variant covers. I mean, there's no cohesive way to do it because we don't agree on it, and maybe we shouldn't have to agree on it. And that's the problem. We're fighting. We're spending all this time fighting about how it should work. If we just let it work, maybe all of it will work in its own way and find its way to where it needs to go.
I also feel that what might work for me might not work for you, and what might work for I'll throw out my friend Paul Gomez. What might work for Paul Gomez might not work for you, and that's all right because Paul Gomez is doing a book called PTSD, and that book has a different audience than Lola XOXO has. So naturally, your book, Lola XOXO, is going to be marketed a different way. And so if Paul is targeting, family-friendly veteran organizations, and obviously is in a very veteran, friendly community, that's going to be a different sale. And I think sometimes we compare things trying to make them apple to apple when it's really apples to oranges. And I don't think you can compare an apple to an orange. I mean,
that's
they're both
true.
And that's as far as they go.
Yeah, it's like movies, isn't it? Not everybody's gonna like horror flicks and or rom-coms, right? Like, they're all a certain medium, but you don't ever see two people going, you have to Barbie and Oppenheimer it. You got to have both.
No. They each need to come together and make a baby movie together, and it could be Barbie bombs away. Hey, we laugh now. It's going to be a $2 billion movie.
I'm waiting. Well, you put the idea out there. You better get someone on that script and kickstart that thing.
It's in production starting tomorrow.
No pun intended.
Oh my God. So many things I could say. But it's terrible, But I do want to show at least I think 4 more covers before we talk about what you got going on. And it's one of my favorite topics. So obviously I'm a huge Hulk fan. I love Hulk.
That was my first Marvel cover. Yeah.
And so I love She-Hulk. I really enjoyed that on Marvel. I know some people didn't. I thought it was fun. Did I think it was the best thing Marvel ever did? No. Did I think it was really enjoyable? Absolutely. And then there's this one, which is really cool.
That's right. That's the one that you showed me.
This is the one that I got.
Nice.
So this one's cool, and I like this one. And then there's this one too, which is cool, which is that. So what was this like? Because having 3 versions of this is pretty cool in some ways. And I like this book, and it's a fun one. Hulk 1, kind of new Marvel. It's fun. I like it. I enjoy it.
I think it's fun. There you go again. It just has to be fun, right? That's what comic books were to me. It's just fun. I understand like it's a business, but it's supposed to be fun. And that's why I got into it, because otherwise, like I said, I could just run a restaurant or something where it's always stressful. It is an art form because culinary school is also part of art school. So it's all the same thing, But yeah, no, working on Marvel is obviously a lifesaver for me, because I think that as a comic book person, you have to figure out what your path is at the beginning. And then once you start one, it's kind of hard to slow the momentum down, because you got to start, making income and connections. And not only that, but your name as an artist is connected to the stuff that you do or don't do, right?
Let's actually talk about legitimacy. So one of the things that has happened to me is that, obviously I have a good relationship with Zenoscope. I have a good relationship with other people and other companies that I've interviewed and done stuff with. And also I used to have a good relationship, and I've taken a break from a bunch of wrestling, but I used to interview a lot of people from Beyond and Wrestling Open. And so all of a sudden, when I walk into a room and I'm asking a wrestler who has 15,000 Instagram followers, but okay, I interviewed all your friends, I automatically have legitimacy. And when I enter a room, and it's very helpful when I want something from somebody, or if I reach out to a Zenoscope writer, I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, Joe Brush was just on 2 weeks ago. My legitimacy level goes up. Not to mention that I have almost 700 interviews, and that I have a good track record. And people are like, okay, now I want to be on your show, because there's some form of legitimacy. And I would imagine in art, and again, I'm not in this space, that because you've done Marvel, you've done DC, the fact that you spent a lot of time in Aspen, now you have legitimacy not only at other companies, but within Marvel, but even furthermore as a option for a comic shop to be like, cool, we know Siya Oum has done work for Marvel, and we know her style, and we know that she is received by a bunch of other fellow artists. We feel comfortable carrying her cover.
Did you was the question like, how does it feel, or is that like it's actually true, that what your assessment of it would be true?
I'm curious in which that do you feel that is kind of what's going on? Because to me,
I mean, it'd be kind of, yeah. I think you kind of have to know that, because if there's any, okay, so with any kind of business, if there's I wouldn't call it speculation market, but when there's a value put on an item or product, whether it's baseball cards or, I mean, even fantasy football, if you want to go there, right? There is a value put on something, and if there's that kind of market where there's a value being put on something, then you know that legitimacy and then being vetted to some extent
I
has
asked
to matter to some extent, and
I
it's like a
asked
resume, but a resume that could grow or diminish with time, I guess.
I asked this question because right now on Kickstarter, I'm having legitimacy questions with a lot of creators, and I don't think I'm the only one, where I think there's serious legitimacy questions being asked. There's issues of lateness, there's issues of other things, and even there's issues. I mean, the whole thing with Fables. I mean, no matter which side you stand on with DC, there is a question of legitimacy with everything. And then I've seen a bunch of hyperbole. I've seen a bunch of, quote unquote scuffles. And I don't know if it's a marketing ploy or if it's legit or if it's not. And this is where I think it's very interesting. And
Mm.
obviously, I buy a lot of comic books. A lot of what I buy is on legitimacy. So I buy a lot of Mount Olympus.
Because it's an investment for you, and you need to make sure it's an actual investment, not like a
I trust that Ron from Mount Olympus will deliver. I have no indication that he won't. There are other people that I'm hemming and hawing on doing business with because I don't trust their legitimacy. And that's a very complicated thing. And that didn't exist, 3 years ago in my world. And that's why I asked this question, because on an art level, I mean, I've spoke to Terry Cavanaugh, who was a big Marvel editor, back in like the late 80s, early 90s. And and Denny O'Neil, God rest his soul. There I felt there was legitimacy when he was editing. And I don't know if that exists anymore. And that's why I asked this, because when I know that your covers, and so I guess that's where I'm going with this, because to me, I'm having that internal issue in what
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and it's a very unpleasant position for me.
Well,
That
let's
thing,
put it this way. Sorry.
yeah,
So I mean, I've talked to my colleagues about this, especially when Kickstarter started to do the numbers it was doing, and people started to all have Kickstarters. Our concern was, yes, these people could draw, maybe write or do whatever, but to put a whole book together and distribute it, and then cover the cost that that's required to put everything together, that team or that person may not have had that experience, and then once they see for themselves, it's like, oh, okay, so there's another dimension of the business that we never had to deal with when we were just being a work for hire, right? So that's kind of where, yeah, I could understand where people's concerns are. And that's why when I had the conversation, is like, let's make sure, or they were saying like, we got to make sure the book is done, or at least mostly done, before you even consider kickstarting it. So you basically have to cover the cost ahead of time for the production, and so that's the smart people. That's what they did. But the other people who were just kind of early on, kind of getting into it, then you realize like the cost to deliver, the cost to keep up with everything and all the different tiers, and the, like just cost coming out of your eyes, your nose, like you just know nothing about. Like it's a huge undertaking. And then it's not until you have to do everything yourself that you realize, oh, the interaction with your fan base and the people you work with, your communication and how professional you are maybe is really important. Like you can't just like tell everybody to go, eat an ice cream cone, and then, all of a sudden come back and say, oh, hey, can I have some money for my stuff? It's like, are you kidding me? Like, no, you can't. But yeah, it's interesting, but it's probably why you're so concerned, because a lot of us didn't have that experience on the back end of doing a book, and a project.
Oh, I'm also in a different boat, because when you interview a lot of people and then you're talking to a lot of people and you see a lot of stuff behind the scenes, you've been the victim of some stuff. You realize that somebody isn't fulfilling book A, but they just did 25,000 on their second book that they're doing, but not of that thing, and they do another 27,000 on issue 2, but they still haven't done this other book over here that raised 8K. Like all of a sudden, like I have a lot of questions, and I have questions about that publisher that's publishing the book that just did $47,000 of their legitimacy. And
It's funny. I don't even know, because I don't know these companies or these projects directly, because I'm out of that loop outside of the ones that I'm doing. So I'm curious to know, I'll probably find out on my own, who the people are who aren't delivering on their books and stuff, because that sounds scary for me, because it has it puts a bad light on people who are, projects that are trying to kickstart and actually have legitimacy. So that doesn't look very good. You know what I mean? And same with like some companies and projects not paying people. That definitely, I know how that feels like, so that doesn't look and sound very good. And you put your reputation on the line,
the amount of promises that I have been granted in this industry from people, and people, CCC drives me crazy. My biggest pet peeve is if you say, Andrew, I'm going to hook you up with a free book, mine with your address. I give you my address, and then the book never comes. And then you ask me for an interview, or you ask me for something after. I'm like, why did you offer me something? I wasn't asking you for anything, because I know how low your margins are. If the one person out of everybody should know how low everybody's margins are, it's me, and I run a business. So I understand when people say, oh, I'm going to take care of you. There have been 3 people who have done that, and there have been about 50 people who offered. And this raises questions of legitimacy. That is what, 6%, I want to say? Out of so 94% of people have offered me something, asked for my address, and then never gave me an explanation. And this is why I have issues of legitimacy, because that to me is that I didn't ask for anything from anybody, because I understand that most people really can't afford at the moment. Should they do it? Probably, if they wanted to, especially when I'm doing them a favor. But I also understand that it's brutally low, this industry. But that's why I didn't ask, because I understand people's margins. So, and then going to your point, I mean, people not paying and all that stuff. I mean, here I am looking at companies that I like, and then I find out they don't pay their artists, and then their artists are, there's a good chance they're not going to get their money. It's complicated for me, because it's like I don't want to support bad behavior, but I also want the book. And then it's like it puts me as a consumer into a moral dilemma.
Yeah, I mean, and so I guess the problem remains that a lack of transparency and just basic business stuff again, right? Again, and customer service, I suppose. when it comes down to it.
I mean, this is something in which I did a video in, and I was very torn in my comic book hangout with the issue of Fables, because I bought the box set. I wanted to read Fables, but I think Bill Willingham is not in. He wants Fables. DC hasn't paid him. They haven't put out the last two issues of his thing, and there's a big whole carfuckle, for lack of a better word, disaster. It's a big scuffle. It's a big like bloody mess. But I'm like, I want to read Fables because I read half of it, but I want the box set. So am I supporting DC by buying that box set? Technically, yes, but I want to read it nonetheless. And like, obviously, I had two of people that I know very well, and they were kind of teasing me a little bit. But I'm like, guys, I want to read it nonetheless. Like, and I said I'm torn on it, but I don't think I'm supporting DC because I didn't buy anything else from DC since that, but I wanted to read it, and it was a good deal. It was $120 and a nice box set of 150 issues of Fables. Like, I don't know. It's just.
Well, okay, so let me put it this way then.
You can make fun of me too. You can make fun of me too for it. It's all right.
No. Here's the thing: is, I mean, okay. So I don't think it's the fans' responsibilities or your consumers' responsibilities to basically have to, because they're what they want is the product, right? So your job isn't to worry about whatever. Like, I understand why people boycott and they don't support something. That's up to the consumers what they want to do to help support or not support something. However, as the person in the industry and doing the thing, I think it's my responsibility to, okay, like if a company doesn't pay me, I will never work with them again. And I'll make sure that if there's a reference that I don't send people in that direction, right? Like, that's my job as the person creating the thing. Whereas with the fan base, they could do whatever they want, but I'm not going to tell you like to not do something, because maybe you're in that dilemma where it's like, well, I just made it harder for you to figure out what to do. And then at the end of the day, you don't spend your money at all on anybody, on anything. And there goes that. And then everything goes down the drain again. So yeah, it's quite the dilemma.
Just because I feel like I'm caught in the middle of that, but I still have my Fables. I still read it. I really enjoyed it. And I am halfway through book 2. It's a big book. So it's like 300 pages. It's fantastic.
Well, I like, yeah, it's yeah. So just you do you as a consumer, and I do me as the professional, and hopefully I keep it that way, and more people do it. That's all you can do.
But I do want to talk about one more thing before I let you get out of here. And that's your creator-owned stuff. And obviously you got Neo Wonderland, that comic series. Is it out, or is it still being developed for
It's still being developed. Since I wrote that story like 20 years ago, and I've kind of updated it somewhat based off of my own experience, and just I'm glad I waited for that one, because I feel like it's a good timing, for the book, and it's going to be drawn and published the way I wanted it to, like 20 years ago. So that's my main creator-owned one. But I had another one that I was working on. It was Dragon's Glacier, which I was pumping out so fast because it was going to be a manga. It was going to be small, and I'm basing it off of. So, I mean, true transparency here is I'm trying to figure out a good business model that's sustainable without cutting corners, right? Like, so there's the way that you print mangas. I'm trying to study that, and then there's the way that books are being printed. So it's not taking shortcuts. It's just to understand it, because I feel like if more of us try to understand the business in itself, and then like there's a low, there's no overhead, then I think it would work out. So that's kind of why I have 2 books going at the same time, and one of them is going to get done before the other one. And since I'm used to doing like how Lola, okay, if you did Lola like I did, where you colored things by hand, which is stupid, then just doing a black and white book and it being this tiny, like the paper is literally this small. It's like, nothing to do. So you only live once, right? So
what is this like? Because I think this is your book. It's your publishing company. And I emphasize the your, because Lola XOXO was your book, but it was done through Aspen.
Yeah. So this is going to be my own publishing house.
So what is that like? Because now it's all on you, and there's no excuses.
You know what? Like, but I think I did that because I didn't want any excuses. Because at some point you have to like, okay, well, if I want it to be good and I think I could do a good job, then it's time to put the put your money where your mouth is, right? So we'll see. But no, I think it's because I love comics, and me and a few of my friends, when we talk about it, like we love it, the medium so much, the industry so much, that we have to do whatever we can to figure it all out and then have it sustainable, because I want to be able to draw when I'm like 60, 70, and not have to like have a panic attack, about my finances. So
Yeah, I understand that.
and I'm fortunate because I have pages to sell, like you're saying. Like I have physical pages where I could there's always a secondary market for me, for my stuff. So
I completely understand that, in which that, there's a reason why I have a day job and I live below my means. And truth be told, I have a 401k at my job and I have health insurance. And I had a serious issue this year, and my best investment was in my healthcare.
I agree with you.
It sounds funny when you have a 6-figure bill that your healthcare takes care of. It's a fantastic investment.
No, it is. It is
Fantastic. My surgery this year was very, very expensive.
Yeah, man. Like it kind of, everything feeds into itself. So
let me explain how I felt. So I said on air, if I owed $10,000 for my surgery, I would consider that a bargain.
that's true. That's
How
true.
how many people? And I said I wouldn't even blink. It'd be paid off. I had the money, and then it was well thought out. It was significantly less what I owed on my surgery. So what people don't understand is that I don't think how many people in America fully understand that $10,000 to me would have not been fun, but it would have been a blink. It would have been paid off in 10 seconds or less, and it would have been done and over with, and I would have moved on. In which that, but it was significantly less, and that thing was paid off a lot slower. So because I was paying it off over 10 months at 100.
It works for your credit, so it's all good.
Oh my God, my credit is insane. I don't even know what my credit looks like, but apparently SoFi loves me, so figure that one out. They want to give me a lot of money. That's
yeah, exactly. It's so good that you could probably buy 2 cars and a house and you'd be good.
I mean, if I put money on a down payment and I wanted to borrow from SoFi, it would pay for like 60% of the down.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the whole finances thing, because like my next YouTube episode after the 2 that I'm doing, I specifically asked everybody, what do you guys want me to do an episode on? And they said, can you make money in comics? Is there money in comics? I'm like, oh, this is going to be a hard one. So of course my friend texted me the numbers he came up with. I'm like, okay, well, I want to be thoughtful about this one, because I may be getting a lot of people into this business and then they're just like stepping into a landmine. Or
I'll complicate your episode. I'm going to ask you. So on 90,000, what percentage do you think I do in pure profit in my eBay store, give or take, percentage wise per unit on average?
Well, I mean, 30% would be good, right?
30% would be good, yeah. Pure profit, not fees and everything else. I mean, we're talking pure profit. So I'm gonna revamp this. So in a business, you could buy an item. So we'll use this. If I bought this item for $25 and then I sold it for 75, and I take out all the money and then take the $75 out, that's a different position than pure profit. If I was to sell this thing, if I bought for 25, 75, and then eBay takes 13%. So to actually, we'll use 100. So eBay on a pure profit on this book, if I sold it for 100, paid 25, eBay takes 13%, which comes off. So that's 87 minus shipping, taking out shipping. Then I would have to take off 25 out of that 87, which would drop this thing down to 52. I want to say, I think or 62. Out of that 62, you then have to take out a position on taxes. For me, that's 20%, give or take. So that's another $12, I would like to say. So that brings me down to 50. And then there's usually other expenses that occur. So maybe we're down to $46 in pure profit on that book. Minus 25, because the 25 is treated as a return of capital. So now on that number, I am down to $21 in pure profit. That gets cut pretty quick.
Exactly.
So that's a 21% pure profit range. Now, if we want to evaluate this, because I'm purposely complicating your episode, Do you know what the standard to measure growth is in America per company? Did you actually know
Um,
what the standard is?
I
I,
don't, well, I'd have to, obviously I'd have to look it up, but I definitely know that a good margin is like, a really good margin is 30, but average was like
the
20 to 15,
for
15 to 20.
for for a business, what you want to evaluate it against is the S&P 500. The
Mm.
S&P 500 over 10 years on average has done 11.7% on a 10-year basis. Some years it does 8%, some years it does negative 2%, some years it does
So you
35%.
have to average your basically on
So
a,
the way I evaluate my business is that if you have a business that is beating the S&P as far as your profit, so if you're doing 22%, you're beating the S&P's rate of return by 11 points.
but then is
So
that over a year or a 5 year, or like, how would you measure that? Because what if
you
one year you're doing?
you could do that yearly. You could do it over 5 years. It's the idea, though, that the way I evaluate is that I say, cool, my business is either trailing the S&P by 6 points or it's beneath the S&P, but also like the S&P right now is at 18%. So if I'm doing 28%, I'm only beating the S&P by 10 points. But if there's a bad year and the S&P is down negative 10%, and I'm doing 15%, I'm beating the S&P by 25 points. But I also like to evaluate over 10 years. I don't
Mm.
have 10 years of data at the
Yeah,
moment,
exactly.
but even if you evaluate over 5 years, because I could take the same amount of money that I pumped into my business and would I beat the S&P 500 is how I evaluate it, because I'm looking at my business as an asset, as an investment. And that's how I evaluate it. That's just one metric. So when we talk about making money in comics, I think part of the problem where this goes is that if you're running a business, which I run a business, and it's comic book centric, it's comic book product wise, I use an S&P evaluation because I am a business and the S&P is the top 500 stocks, and which means it's the top 500 businesses in America in an index fund, because I have to evaluate it on that realm. That's a different way how to evaluate, because if your comic book in your Kickstarter is a business, you should not be evaluating it on a comic book one for one. You should be evaluating it as a business. And I think it's very complicated. It's a different way how to think about it, because you could have 6 books coming out a year. And if you have a surplus of 30 grand, does it really matter that book two made only 200 books, but book three made 40,000? Does it really matter if it's all in the same business?
So I think
Did I
based
just
off
make,
of how,
did I just make your video really bad?
no, not really. I mean, you can, but let's just put it this way, like, because of the way that comic books work, like you work on it, and if you're getting paid, you know, uh, for the book, then already you can predict, okay, this is how many, this is what I'm gonna get. But then if you don't plan in advance, then you don't get to figure out what your profit margins are until the end of the year, and then you see it. But then, you know what I mean? Like, you have to think ahead of time. If you, let's just say you're starting out, that's different than someone who's been doing it for 5 years. And you could you have to predict at least 6 months in advance. But I mean, honestly, from my standpoint right now, I'm thinking a year, especially if you're doing a Kickstarter. You may be getting that lump sum, but if you didn't deliver the book and you have to do an issue two and people are mad at you, you could probably kiss your profit margins goodbye the second time, I mean, so
It's interesting you bring this up. So I'll give
it
everybody.
could also be like like a company that's first that's basically trying to be go public. I mean, they have to evaluate whether or not they have a 5 year track record or something like that, right? Where you can't just assume that people are just going to throw money at you, or they evaluate how much you're going to be going for and all that stuff. So
Did you also feel that, especially on Kickstarter, because I don't know if you heard this phrase before, but it's one of my favorite phrases, is that if you fund on Kickstarter, that's not a successful Kickstarter. To me, it's getting your book into my hands. Once every person has your book,
yes,
and
yes,
you have a
yeah,
successful Kickstarter.
I agree. Yeah,
Funding, funding is only half of it.
I
And
don't even know if it's even half of it, to be honest with you.
I'm being
um
generous. I'm being generous.
Okay, I was like, well, that's only like the oof. Yeah, I mean, to me, especially when I get asked to do variant covers on Kickstarters or whatever part I play, it's like if I have one that I'm back or like I'm a part of and it doesn't reach the goal, it's like, ooh, this isn't good. Because you want to be, you want to be 1 for 1 or at least like 10 for 10, or just batting 100% of the time, and because then it doesn't look good when you don't. It doesn't.
Oh, I know, I know. Kickstarter was bad for me. I ran a Kickstarter for this show, and oh my God, I'm never doing that again.
Yeah, it takes a lot of goodwill and you know,
I funded. I funded. People didn't think would fund, and I funded.
but it's rough on the other yeah, afterwards, right? Like all that stuff you have to do.
I got a lot of shit. I got a lot of shit in the community for what I did, and I still am getting shit for it. And my response is back. My response is running the show isn't cheap. It's not massively expensive, but it's not free. And I'm sorry to say it, but it is expensive. There are expenses in this show, and so I wanted to find a way how to help cover my costs. And I got shit for it, and I don't really get why. I still don't get why, but they didn't kill me yet. So and I'm here for life. So if I didn't make it, guess what, guys? I would still be here. I would still be here for life. And you're stuck with me. So I'm sorry, everybody, but you're stuck with me. So you might as well join me, because if you can't beat them, you should join them. But my favorite tip is because I agree about, because I do pre-sales on my eBay store. On a pre-sale, what I have to pay eBay upfront, so eBay gets their money, but I have to put that money actually aside until that item is delivered. So I put it into a high yield savings account, and that money is set aside because God forbid my client wants to cancel that item, eBay will side with them and not me. And so as a result, now I hate to admit this, and it's all right if you make fun of me. My Little Pony, the Magic the Gathering cards came out, and they're adorable, and they're hollow foils. And
Oh, there
it's
you go. You had me at hollow foil.
so there's 4 of them, and it was a secret drop. It was there for maybe like a week, and then a bunch of people missed them, and so I put it up on my eBay store. Somebody bought them. They paid a little bit more than what they were going for. I made some money on it, but it's not coming until March. So I had to take the money he paid, and I had to put it into a high yield savings account, so that God forbid in January, if he says, "Where's my cards?" and he opens up a case, I'm covered. And so I can't access that money until March 1st. But that was 2 weeks ago, these cards dropped. So that means I am holding on to essentially debt until that thing is delivered. Now, I didn't get billed for them yet. That's the crazier part, is that I'm earning interest on something that I didn't get billed for yet. But that's not the case with everything. And so I think
No.
that's something that people have to fully understand also, is that because people on Kickstarter and even I think in comps sometimes dip into the cookie jar, and they don't set money aside, because let's say you get paid in advance for a cover, it's still going to cost you to do something and do that cover monetarily wise with supplies. Now, I don't think if you got paid $600, it's going to cost you $600 to do that cover. But it might cost you $40 of materials.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess like a lot of the businesses though, and even if, like for the most part, if you own a house or a car, it's all debt based, debt based, which means you're not scot free with anything. And I think you're right. You're dipping into the cookie jar. I mean, it's kind of like using your credit card without having a way of paying that back in any way, shape, or form. That's obviously not a good idea, but I guess people don't look at it that way with a lot of these things, so. Or they're doing it on a necessity basis instead of like, oh, this is going to be a sustainable business model. So if you're doing it because you're desperate, that's going to be a different way of doing things. Whereas like if you weren't ready to do it in the first place, it's probably not going to be easy for you. Like some people could probably do it, but I haven't seen it yet, I guess. Like that's why I held off, because like, of course I wanted to do my book a few years ago, but I'm like, let's just wait for the perfect time where everybody's kind of ironed stuff out. I've ironed stuff out with my schedule and I could deliver and then focus on it. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of nothing. And it's kind of depressing when you can't finish a book. I mean, that's the one thing that gives me anxiety. It's not finishing a book. So, yeah.
So are you kickstarting it?
I'm going to have a hybrid model, I think, because I've talked to enough people where I want to keep the industry as healthy as I can possibly keep it without like just being monetarily, well off myself. So it has to be a combination of a few things for me to think that it's a good business model, because I do want more people to read my books. I want that too. I don't want just to make the money off of it and to sell it to the few people that'll buy it. I want it to be just rotation basically in comic shops and online and stuff. That's my goal. So
So when are you launching exactly, or is it just Q1 of 2024?
I'm thinking it's gonna be Q1 just because I like I said, I'm my concern is not finishing stuff. So I have to get Lady Mechanica out and ready to go. We're focused on that right at this very second because my own book is already written. I've already drawn. Yes, there you go. Woo! So I've already gotten it going where I know it's going to be fine. So I'm not too concerned with that, but I'm not going to start kickstarting it until I have everything in place and the book is basically deliverable. And then it's like, okay, well, now I'm just going to finance it. So I'm lucky in the sense that I draw all the art and write it myself. Whereas, so my overhead is non-existent really, except for maybe the time I'm spending on it. And so I'm okay with that. I'm not worried about like, oh man, the letterist didn't turn stuff in, or I got to worry about the inker and the colorist. I've made it so it's okay for me to do this myself, and I could predict when I'll get something done. Whereas with other teams, you're relying on everybody to get everything together, and that's a little harder to predict, So
Fair enough.
you gotta take what you can and strategize and figure out a way to get stuff done. There is always a downside to something, or there's a trade-off somewhere, right? So the trade-off for me is time, but in return, I don't have to spend a ton of money to get something going.
That is true. That is true. And this is the advantage that artists have who become writers and who can color their own work.
It is a visual medium, so there's that. It still is.
It's a great advantage, but it's at some point I will enter this space, but I am not ready for it. And right now I like my profit margins and my money a little too much.
Doesn't hurt.
And I really, really enjoy what I do. And on 100,000, I will make on the low end 28,000 pure profit. On the high end, I'll make about 32 to 35 in pure profit. And I just know where to park that money to make me even more. So,
well, you know what? We appreciate it because you keep the market alive to some extent, and you can't not have that.
Oh, I love money, and that's no secret. There's plenty of people right now hating me on my take on the MCU. But anyway,
well, I don't know enough about it right now to give you my feedback. So,
I have a very different opinion than everybody else. Maybe I'll be talking about this on Friday with a bunch of people who are going to.
Oh, by all means, because once you start working in the industry, you consume less and less content because you just can't consume everything. So, or it feels like work. So I've moved away and just started to, digest other types of entertainment, I guess.
I don't even watch the MCU. I just understand the economic market of what's going on. And, wrong and I'm right. So and I'll make a lot of money doing it. So that's the point. But I digress. I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. So where can people find you, bother you, hit you up, find your work, buy your original pages, see you at a
okay. Well, thank you. Just SiyaOum.com has all of my social media links. I mean, I'm just Siya_Oum on Instagram, and I think I'm Siya Oum as well on YouTube. I'm pretty consistent with my screen names. So I'm really active on YouTube and Instagram for the most part. So yeah, and I have my own books coming out. But right now it's Lady Mechanica. That's my biggest project, but that's kind of the direction I'm going. And usually this kind of stuff takes at least 2 years of your life. So I don't see myself straying too far away from that. We'll see how I do. It's a lot of talk until you do your own Kickstarter and you're like, oh shit, well, I guess I wasn't what I thought it was. Right.
I understand. And I thought it was going to be something and it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And I learned a lot. On my campaign. And if I was to redo it, I would do it again.
It humbles you really quick though, for sure. It does.
Yeah, you know what is yeah. But honestly, I should have been way more cocky. I should have been like, bring it. Yeah, I should have went in. I would if I do this again, I'm gonna come in a very different way. And
Mm.
yeah, but my campaign is whatever. But also, I didn't need my Kickstarter because I funded this show through sponsorships, and I went to Kickstarter as just to get more funding for the next 2 years. And so everybody, there was a reason why I came in a very different way on my campaign. But I digress. That it's not about me and my campaign. That's 2-3 years ago. So thank God I'm not doing it again. I can't handle it. I can't handle it. The amount of drinking that I did during my campaign. Oh my gosh. Oh, I don't know what was worse. My alcohol bill during January or my alcohol bill in January. It was necessary. It was necessary. But I digress. But I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to keep saying it, that you have to support indie comics. You have to support comics. And the way you do that is by buying comics, actually backing Kickstarters, buying, things from shops and stores where people have their books in there. Like Aspen has a bunch of Lola.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think they have a Black Friday sale coming up, right? So I think it's
Probably. Yeah, they've inspired me to do my Black Friday this year because I think I missed last year. I just was probably doing deadlines and I didn't have time to send out the newsletter. So it's like, oh well.
it's all right. It's all right. Everybody gets to miss one or two. There's no excuse not to watch the Jets and the Dolphins this year, everybody. They are playing on Black Friday. It's the first one. It's the inaugural Black Friday football game. It's going to be a great game, which means you should put money on the Dolphins. That's exactly what that means because the Jets are horrendous. They're
But what if
horrendous.
they won? If they won as an investor, you would know that you would probably get a lot of money for that one. Just
But I
just
would
take a
like
chance.
I would like to win in football. But the Dolphins are really good.
Wouldn't we all? Yeah.
That's the problem. DraftKings, guys. I should have put that affiliate link right in there. It's like it's magic. You get $5 in bonus. You bet $5, you get $200 in bonus bets. No, that's Ryan Fitzpatrick's job and Kevin Hart. Those commercials are just so wonderful. But anyway, enough about the commercials. Go buy some comics. Go do that. Go support indie people. Actually buy their art. If they have Buy Me a Coffee or a Patreon or whatever, go do that too. It's very important. And then as far as I'm concerned, I am Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, now known as X. I am Pop Anime Comics on Instagram. I am Pop Anime Comics on Facebook. You can come bother me. I run the Facebook group, Indie Comics Connect, and it's a free group, so you can join, post as much as you want in my group. It's always appreciated. And then, yeah, so that's everything. I got YouTube is Pop Anime Comics, TikTok is Pop Anime Comics, and my eBay store. If you'd like a free copy of this, in your comic order, is Pop Anime Comics Collectibles. And I sell a lot of weird books and other cool stuff and cards, and some weird, fun stuff is in my store. Pop Funkos, you name it, it's in there. And there's always some cool stuff coming in. And I got, in the next probably 6 months, probably about $30,000 to $40,000 worth more of merch coming. So definitely, if you're looking for something off the road or rare books, I got you covered. But enough about me. I'm going to give you the final word.
Yeah, I love comics. We all love comics. That's why we do it. So let's just keep supporting it, like you were saying. And my job is to focus on it and hopefully make it a little bit more enjoyable. But other than that, like, to each their own. But man, comic books are awesome. They are.
I don't think I could have said that any better myself, everybody. And that is